Blog Talk Radio.
12345.
Good.
Am I ready to start?
Yep.
Hello, everyone. This is Jerry Pippin with a special report and commentary on the events in Syria and the moral issue of whether or not to intervene because of mass destructive weapons in the form of poison gas, sarin gas, that was used on an innocent population. What we're going to do here, first of all, is play the comments of President Obama made on Saturday. And he basically is saying and laying out his case that he's going to take it to Congress with a full debate. As you know, the UK tried that, and the Prime Minister there was rebuked and did not get the okay. But Obama is still going ahead with this and getting Congress to have a debate on it, which will be scheduled as soon as they come back after Labor Day, when Congress is back in session. It'll be an inspiring time for debate, and I think President Obama, and this is where the commentary comes in, is doing the right thing, even though it is definitely a risk, and it will be up to the United States to actually convince everyone that they have real evidence this time. Unfortunately, because of the Bush administration and the way they did the Iraq War, making up the news about weapons of mass destruction, the people are pretty sour on the idea of believing the U.S. on anything. And so we are actually paying the price of previous sins from other one in administrations. But the problem, of course, is that you can't do anything, in my opinion. This is where the commentary comes in, and I got more to talk about it in a minute. But I think the first thing we need to do is let President Obama explain exactly why he's doing it the way he's doing it. And then we have President Putin, who is, of course, an ally of Syria, and the Russian take on it. And actually, if you listen to this, the Putin response is really not anything that he couldn't back down on. So I don't think it's as critical as it first appears about whether or not Russia will go along. Unfortunately, the UN Security Council was not able to do anything because of the veto power, and I have more comments about that in a moment. But first of all, let's listen to both men. First, President Obama, then Putin.
Good afternoon, everybody. 10 days ago, the world watched in horror as men, women, and children were massacred in Syria in the worst chemical weapons attack of the 21st century. Yesterday, the United States presented a powerful case that the Syrian government was responsible for this attack on its own people. Our intelligence shows the Assad regime and its forces preparing to use chemical weapons, launching rockets in the highly populated suburbs of Damascus, and acknowledging that a chemical weapons attack took place. And all of this corroborates what the world can plainly see. Hospitals overflowing with victims, terrible images of the dead. All told, well over 1,000 people were murdered. Several hundred of them were children. Young girls and boys gassed to death by their own government. Now, this attack is an assault on human dignity. It also presents a serious danger to our national security. It risks making a mockery of the global prohibition on the use of chemical weapons. It endangers our friends and our partners along Syria's borders, including Israel, Jordan, Turkey, Lebanon, and Iraq. It could lead to escalating use of chemical weapons or their proliferation to terrorist groups who would do our people harm. In a world with many dangers, this menace must be confronted. Now, after careful deliberation, I have decided that the United States should take military action against Syrian regime targets. This would not be an open-ended intervention. We would not put boots on the ground. Instead, our action would be designed to be limited in duration and scope. But I'm confident we can hold the Assad regime accountable for their use of chemical weapons, deter this kind of behavior, and degrade their capacity to carry it out. Our military has positioned assets in the region. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs has informed me that we are prepared to strike whenever we choose. Moreover, the chairman has indicated to me that our capacity to execute this mission is not time sensitive. It will be effective tomorrow, or next week, or 1 month from now. And I'm prepared to give that order. But, having made my decision as Commander-in-Chief based on what I am convinced is our national security interests, I'm also mindful that I'm the President of the world's oldest constitutional democracy. I've long believed that our power is rooted not just in our military might, but in our example as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's why I've made a second decision. I will seek authorization for the use of force from the American people's representatives in Congress. Over the last several days, we've heard from members of Congress who want their voices to be heard. I absolutely agree. So this morning I spoke with all 4 congressional leaders, and they've agreed to schedule a debate and then a vote as soon as Congress comes back into session. In the coming days, my administration stands ready to provide every member with the information they need to understand what happened in Syria and why it has such profound implications for America's national security. And all of us should be accountable as we move forward, and that can only be accomplished with a vote. I'm confident in the case our government has made without waiting for UN inspectors. I'm comfortable going forward without the approval of a United Nations Security Council that so far has been completely paralyzed and unwilling to hold Assad accountable. As a consequence, many people have advised against taking this decision to Congress. And undoubtedly they were impacted by what we saw happen in the United Kingdom this week when the Parliament of our closest ally failed to pass a resolution with a similar goal, even as the Prime Minister supported taking action. Yet while I believe I have the authority to carry out this military action without specific congressional authorization, I know that the country will be stronger if we take this course, and our actions will be even more effective. We should have this debate because the issues are too big for business as usual. And this morning, John Boehner, Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and Mitch McConnell agreed that this is the right thing to do for our democracy. A country faces few decisions as grave as using military force, even when that force is limited. I respect the views of those who call for caution, particularly as our country emerges from a time of war that I was elected in part to end. But if we really do want to turn away from taking appropriate action in the face of such an unspeakable outrage, then we must acknowledge the costs of doing nothing. Here's my question for every member of Congress and every member of the global community. What message will we send if a dictator can gas hundreds of children to death in plain sight and pay no price? What's the purpose of the international system that we've built if a prohibition on the use of chemical weapons that has been agreed to by the governments of 98% of the world's people and approved overwhelmingly by the Congress of the United States is not enforced? Make no mistake, this has implications beyond chemical warfare. If we won't enforce accountability in the face of this heinous act, what does it say about our resolve to stand up to others who flout fundamental international rules? To governments who would choose to build nuclear arms? To terrorists who would spread biological weapons? To armies who carry out genocide? We cannot raise our children in a world where we will not follow through on the things we say, the accords we sign, the values that define us. So just as I will take this case to Congress, I will also deliver this message to the world. While the UN investigation has some time to report on its findings, we will insist that an atrocity committed with chemical weapons is not simply investigated, it must be confronted. I don't expect every nation to agree with the decision we have made. Privately, we've heard many expressions of support from our friends, but I will ask those who care about the writ of the international community to stand publicly behind our action. And finally, let me say this to the American people. I know well that we are weary of war. We've ended one war in Iraq, we're ending another in Afghanistan, and the American people have the good sense to know we cannot resolve the underlying conflict in Syria with our military. In that part of the world, there are ancient sectarian differences, and the hopes of the Arab Spring have unleashed forces of change that are going to take many years to resolve. And that's why we're not contemplating putting our troops in the middle of someone else's war. Instead, we'll continue to support the Syrian people through our pressure on the Assad regime, our commitment to the opposition, our care for the displaced, and our pursuit of a political resolution that achieves a government that respects the dignity of its people. But we are the United States of America, and we cannot and must not turn a blind eye to what happened in Damascus. Out of the ashes of World War, we built an international order and enforced the rules that gave it meaning. And we did so because we believe that the rights of individuals to live in peace and dignity depends on the responsibilities of nations. We aren't perfect, but this nation, more than any other, has been willing to meet those responsibilities. So to all members of Congress of both parties, I ask you to take this vote for our national security. I am looking forward to the debate. In doing so, I ask you, members of Congress, to consider that some things are more important than partisan differences or the politics of the moment. Ultimately, this is not about who occupies this office at any given time. It's about who we are as a country. I believe that the people's representatives must be invested in what America does abroad. And now's the time to show the world that America keeps our commitments. We do what we say. And we lead with the belief that right makes might, not the other way around. We all know there are no easy options, but I wasn't elected to avoid hard decisions, and neither were the members of the House and the Senate. I've told you what I believe, that our security and our values demand that we cannot turn away from the massacre of countless civilians with chemical weapons. And our democracy is stronger when the President and the people's representatives stand together. I'm ready to act in the face of this outrage. Today I'm asking Congress to send a message to the world that we are ready to move forward together as one nation. Thanks very much.
Здравый смысл говорит сам за себя.
It's common sense. Syrian government troops are on the offensive and have surrounded the opposition in several regions. In these conditions, to give a trump card to those who are appealing to external military involvement is utter rubbish. It's against all logic, especially on the day of the UN inspector's arrival. That's why I'm sure that it's a provocation of those who want to involve other countries in the Syrian conflict, who want to get the support of powerful international participants, first of all, the USA. I have no doubt in this. As for the position of our American colleagues and friends who insist that Syrian government forces use weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons in this case, and they say they have evidence, well, let them present that evidence to the UN inspectors and to the Security Council. To say they have such evidence but it's a secret is beyond any criticism. It's disrespectful to the partners and participants of international activities. The evidence should be presented, and if it's not presented, there is no evidence.
I mentioned at the top of the show here on this special report, the United States is a victim. The administration, the Obama administration, is a victim of what has happened in previous administrations, and is much like the little boy that cried wolf once too often when they really needed it. No one wanted to believe it. So President Obama does have an uphill battle to claim and show that there is evidence, credible evidence of poison gas. I don't think there's any doubt about it. The pictures are there. The witnesses are there. The doctors talk about it. Over in Syria, when they treated people, many of the medical staff died as well. And And my position, and this is where the commentary comes in, is basically that we can't afford to just turn a blind eye to the use of chemical weapons in such a gross and largely demonstrative way without a devil may care. I'm going to do what I want to as far as Syria is concerned and Assad. The point is you cannot, and there's been a lot of discussion about the red line that Obama had talked about being crossed and how long it's taken. But I think overall, people should not misunderstand where President Obama is coming here from. The basic point is, as he mentioned in the speech, he's elected the M war, and now he's facing a position where you have to do something. Now, what they're going to do will be interesting to see for sure what actually happens. And we are kind of, in my opinion, now this is going to sound pretty hawkish from a non-liberal, but we have to, be careful, evidently, because of previous attacks. You can't just drop missiles in on the Syrian base where poison gas is and explode it all over the place. It's a very careful thing. My personal belief is that this is one time we probably should have used troops, and we probably should have dropped them in there and taken over the facility of the Syrian gas. In other words, basically go in and take possession of poison gas that Assad has. Now, we should have been able to get UN backing on that, and we weren't, of course, at least not yet. And so that's probably an impossible thing to do. But that would be the logical thing, in my opinion. You just, when somebody has weapons like that and they've used them, then you need to go seize them. We do that all the time in the United States, seizures and search and things like that. But we have an international community here that's sick and tired of war. And I can't say as I blame them. I don't think we should have gotten involved in Iraq to begin with, and also Afghanistan, as far as I'm concerned. We could have done that a little differently as well. But we are getting out of both countries, and, the foreign wars, we're sick of it. We don't need to be intervening in the world as the world's policeman. But obviously, if we watched here over the last few weeks and months, no one else is going to be willing to do it. Somebody has to do it. You can't not have mass killings of civilians using poison gas and not do anything about it. If you don't do anything about it, then obviously the prohibition on gas warfare, biological warfare, is going bye-bye. And then, of course, there's also the national security issue that one an easy way for terrorists to get a hold of weapons of mass destruction is basically from someplace like Syria, where, in the fog of war, we've got to be careful. They might actually be able to take some of that gas and commandeer it. And we've all heard stories and seen details about what would happen if you put this gas on a subway, say in New York, or any place that's crowded. It's a deadly weapon, an awful weapon, a weapon of evil proportions. And it was actually, you follow the history, back in Germany when they used poison gas in World War I, the results were horrible. Do we want to get into that sort of thing again? It's a question that I think has only one answer. You cannot allow a nation to use at will weapons of mass destruction on civilians and people. and in fact shouldn't be able to use it in war at all. And we'll find out what happens here. Will Iran line up against us and maybe block some shipping trade and do things like that? It could be. We don't know what the repercussions are. There's a lot of unintended consequences that could happen, but the unintended consequences of doing nothing is much worse, in my opinion. So that's my news and commentary on the events around Syria. It appears that the congressional debate will go ahead, and then the vote will be taken, and then we'll see what we do. I'm Jerry Pippin. Thanks for listening.